Welcome back to the channel. Today what we're going to discuss is why my Viper getting totaled is not necessarily the worst outcome, even though I'm not necessarily thrilled about it. Now I'm just trying to make this one short and sweet, that's why I don't have a really fancy setup or anything, so with that, let's get into it. Now, first things first is the financial side. I went into a little bit more detail about the payout amount and the insurance process and stuff in a different video. I'll link that in the description below. But basically what it comes down to is that I will be getting $42,500 back for the car once it gets totaled out. So I think that's a little bit lower than the market value, but on the positive note, I don't owe any money on this. I'm not underwater on this car, and in fact, that's actually more money than I had total into the car. Now, the only reason that is because I bought a really crappy example that was the cheapest one I could find. Then I made it a very nice example by putting a lot of my own time and my own money into it and doing the work myself. But if I hadn't done all the work on my own that I did, I easily would have been underwater and lost money on this car. So first reason that I'm okay with it getting totaled out, even though I'm not thrilled about this, is that financially I'm going to be all right from it. I'm still technically making money on the car. Again, it's way less than what I think the actual market value is for these right now, but I'm still above water, and I think that's what's really important here. So next is that when I was going over the damage and everything, there were a ton of maybe items, and the more and more we looked at the car, the more we said, no, those aren't maybes, those are very real things that need to get repaired. The shop and I did find frame damage eventually. There was two areas that were actually pretty smashed in right behind the suspension mounting points in the front. So even if you still argued that that was less than the value of the car and that it didn't need to be totaled out, the thing is that with all the stuff that was damaged there, there's still a very real chance that after everything's repaired, something would just be a little bit off for the front suspension or the frame. And my concern is that regardless of how much tweaking and stuff I did, if I got the car back and it didn't drive perfect, I would know how it drove before as a benchmark, and I would always say in my mind that I no longer thought it drove as good as it did before the accident. So my kind of biggest fear was, if there's anything even remotely wrong or just subtly off or different about how the car handles and performs post-repair versus how it did before, I was not going to be happy with it, and I would not enjoy the car as much as I did prior to it because I knew exactly how it was prior and how it was supposed to be. So in my mind, that would take away from a lot of the enjoyment I got from driving it, and realistically, I would probably drive it less as a result of that. And then the next part of that is, even if it did drive the same, I'm very concerned that I just wouldn't trust the car as much because of how quickly it let go and without warning and how unable it was to regain traction. Even though from the logical, functional brain standpoint, I know that that is only because of the tires on a cold morning. Just the fact that I experienced it, there is going to be some sort of a very realistic mental roadblock if I go to track this car and put some more hard driving miles on it, which is the whole point that I bought it and what I want to do with it. So will I really be able to push the car to the same level after the repair as I would have been able to before the repair? And I don't think that I would be able to, so how can I possibly track a car and have fun doing it and enjoy it, knowing that I'm afraid to do what it's really meant to do because I no longer trust this vehicle like I used to? So those are kind of the next two reasons are, is it really going to be right? And even if it is right, am I really going to trust it enough that I can still enjoy the car? Which the answer is pretty much no, I wouldn't be able to for both of those reasons. And then going back to wanting to do the track driving, wanting to do more of the performance driving, the autocross, the track days, I'm already kind of worried about the costs and stuff of those. This car isn't great to begin with from a cost perspective for those. And next, and what's frankly a bigger reason than I wish it was, is I've said in the other videos that timing is kind of critical here as well. And I also alluded to in the other videos that I have other stuff going on in my life at this time. And from a timing perspective, I'm taking this as a right time for the car to get totaled and reevaluating my priorities and kind of rebalancing my life in a few ways. And the reason for that is that I was with the same woman for about 3 or so years, and completely unrelated to the car crash, about a week or two before we had broken up, which, to be honest, it was rough, but we're also living together, we were sharing expenses, and the house is in my name. I paid for all the down payment, I paid for all the mortgage, all the improvements, all the repairs, and they were supposed to be splitting a bunch of these expenses, and then eventually if we got married, then we would split the equity 50-50. Not only were they not paying 50-50, they were at the point that they were barely paying, $200 a month towards the living expenses. So I broke up with them, I kicked them out as well. So a very realistic concern is how much are my living expenses going to go up. I realistically don't think from a financial standpoint that I can maintain everything else in my lifestyle and live on a single income and afford to do track events or any sort of performance driving on the Viper given how high the consumables and stuff are. When I first bought the car and I was living with somebody else and it was supposed to be 50-50, it was a little more feasible, but because they weren't coming anywhere close to that and because now I'm completely doing this on my own, I just don't think I would be able to afford to do the things that I want to do with the car anyways. So as much as I hate to say it, from a timing perspective, this is the right time for me to let go of this car. But the biggest reason of why I'm okay with that is, like I said, if I get it back and it's not right, I'm not going to be happy with it. But right now, despite having a low speed impact and having this really kind of bad experience of it being totaled due to parts availability, I still had a lot of fun with the car. I still loved every mile that I put on that car, and I still made money on it in the end. And currently, all of my memories, all of the ways I think about that car being my dream car are still positive. That is still how I remember it. And if I get it back and it's not right and I can't enjoy it, and if it becomes this plague on my bank account and on my enjoyment and I no longer use it and it just sits there and it defeats the whole purpose, that'll slowly be how I remember this car, and I don't want to remember it that way. So if I cut out here and I let the car go now, I still have the memories of it being exactly what I wanted. I have it being exactly how I wanted it to look, having the wheels exactly the color I wanted, getting the paint to the condition I wanted, and then truth be told, I did everything I wanted to with this car with the exception of one, getting a lot more track time and performance driving in, and then two, just putting more miles on it. And I already put as many miles as I could on it. I took it every chance I could, and I wanted to realistically put 100,000 miles on this car on my own over the span of probably my whole life of owning this thing. But I told myself in the back of my mind I wanted to put 1,000,000 miles on this thing, knowing that even if I hit a third of that, I got my money's worth out of this car and that I would have put more use than I could have ever imagined into this thing. My biggest regret with the car at this point is that I totaled it at such a low speed under such tame conditions, because at least if I was driving this thing super hard and fast when I ended up crashing it, I probably wouldn't admit it out loud, but in the back of my mind I would have said, you know, hey, you kind of earned that one. But other than that, I've got no regrets about this car. I knew this thing was a huge risk for me buying it on day one, and even so, it worked out and I loved every second of it. But I think the reality is, with everything else going on in my life, this is the right time to step away from it. And I'm trying to view this not as something that I lost, but as an opportunity to mentally lock in how much I love this car, how much I enjoyed this car, and maybe as an opportunity to try something new, maybe try something different, maybe do get something that is specifically a track-focused vehicle that I can actually afford to go out and do those events, or maybe pursue one of my other dream cars that I've always wanted, like the Shelby GT350s. Honestly, I genuinely do want to give it a little bit more time before jumping into anything else to really think over what I prioritize in a car. And I know in my mind that if I get another Gen 3 Viper, it's not going to live up to the benchmark that this one has mentally set for me. So really, my next step for a Viper is to get like a Gen 4, a Gen 5, or an ACR. And those are all well out of my budget at this point, especially with the amount of money insurance has given me. So I've got a lot of thinking to do about what those next steps are and what I want the next car to be. And I'm not terribly worried about it at this point because, like I said, I think it's going to work out, and timing wise this does feel right to me. But for now, as much as I don't like that my dream car was totaled, I am at peace with it, and I think that's what matters. Is I still remember this car fondly. I'm still going to look back and relish the years that I had with this and the miles that I put on it and the smile that it put on not only my face, but the face of all the friends and family I was able to share this with, but also the people that I didn't know well, the strangers, the people I met at gas stations or car shows. The amount of joy this spread to so many people, myself included, that is what I remember about this car, and I don't want that to be changed by getting something that is less than perfect back. So with that, thank you guys for following along, thank you guys for hanging with me through this whole thing, and hopefully you'll still be around when I bring in the next one.